The most meaningful questions in life are always questions that you answered before, especially when you've got over 1,000 videos on your YouTube channel. I got a question from the audience, and it was a question I'd addressed before, but the answer was buried somewhere in the middle of a 40-minute long video where it wasn't in the title of the channel. I couldn't find it easily. A bunch of my other fans were looking around. Oh yeah, somewhere you addressed that question. The question was this. If you have left-wing friends, if you have communist friends, if you have socialist friends, if you have friends who confront you with the ultimatum that profit is evil, ask you in various ways to justify how you can have a society built on profit because, from their perspective, profit is theft. That's a rhetorical claim that's actually older than communism. I think older than the formal definition of socialism too, all right? They say property is theft. How can a society built on this concept of a for-profit corporation, for-profit company, et cetera, be anything other than evil? How to respond to this question? We are assuming here that you're talking to somebody you care about. We're assuming this is not some kind of knockdown, drag-out internet debate. This isn't someone you have contempt for, who you're just trying to pwn in the parlance of our times. Just imagine if people are watching this video decades in the future and they have no idea what this slang term pwn meant. But here I am dating myself by using... All right. How do you address this question? Treating it as a meaningful and sincere question. Answer it in a meaningful way. Not behaving as if you're just debunking a left-wing meme about profit, capitalism, the idea that property is theft and that everything that goes on in capitalism, any form of employment as long as it's for profit, is slavery. All right? The first approach, which I would use, again, if I care about someone, I'm trying to build them a human being, I normally do not like to start from abstract reasoning, but from very palpable bottom-up reasoning where I'm appealing to real-world experiences they've had. So, for example, I recently looked at the listing of all of the colleges in this part of Canada, Western Canada, that will give you a degree in early childhood education. So this is different from being a full-fledged school teacher. It lets you do something like run a kindergarten, other kinds of children's programs. And the list provided by the government was divided into private for-profit institutions, non-profit institutions, right? Just a few different categories like that. And you would be surprised if you look at the colleges, especially, say, low-level training colleges that prepare people for technical hands-on jobs. You might really be surprised that some of them are for-profit when you assumed they were non-profit, and vice versa. And if you actually go and visit these colleges and talk to the students and talk to the teachers and look at how they operate, there might be remarkably little difference in your state, in your city, where you're living, between a for-profit technical college and a not-for-profit technical college. Now, if the person you're talking to, if you can talk to them on that level, if you can actually appeal to something they have real-world experience with, where they can contrast a for-profit and not-for-profit project, institution, business, however you want to put this, then this will start to get the wheels turning. Because what you're really assailing here is an overly abstract idea of what profit is, linked to an overly abstract idea about what capitalism itself is. Now, in an earlier video, I spoke through in great detail, where depending on where you live, you may not have this experience, how subtle the difference is between going to a corporate for-profit grocery store and a small co-op, locally owned, not-for-profit grocery store. And you can start to list off what the differences are, right? But if you have this experience in the real world, certainly most major cities in Canada, throughout all of Europe, depending on where you are in the United States, you may or may not have co-op grocery stores. I mean, I don't think they're that popular in America. But a co-op grocery store, your experience as a customer is 98% the same. And the differences, although subtle, it's worth talking about a little bit here. You'll find the co-op grocery store, because they don't have a profit margin, they have to be much more conservative about adopting new products, putting new products on the shelf, whereas the for-profit grocery store will take risks and say, oh, okay, we think this is going to be the hot new product in the year 2020, and they'll get that product on the shelf. They'll do more promotions, they'll do more sales. One of the reasons to have sales is that you overstocked something. You didn't sell as many as you thought you would, and you lower the price. There's more risk-taking. There's more innovation. in the for-profit grocery store. But hey, let's not kid ourselves here. This is not the kind of innovation that's going to put a man on the moon. This is the type of small innovation that's ongoing all the time with the restlessness of commerce in the for-profit sector. And it is true, the nonprofit store lags behind that a little bit. You may find that the nonprofit grocery store pays its employees slightly better. When you actually look into it, you'd be amazed at just how slight the difference is. And indeed, just because the for-profit grocery store may be more successful, you may well be surprised the other way around, that actually the for-profit shop is paying better salaries, providing better benefits, so on and so forth. So this is if someone is your friend, if they respect you and you respect them, they should be willing to listen to this. And it may be really important to address psychologically the defense mechanisms they have. Because what they want to cling to is really no different than a Muslim who's refusing to listen to the particular historical details of the life of the prophet. Like, look, this guy was just a human being. Hey, do you know how many people he married? Do you know about his sex life? Do you know about the political conditions? Do you know about his record on slavery? Where they're refusing to let you talk about the prophet and the founding of Islam's way. They only want to cling to an abstract, I can't even say a summary of their religion. They're extrapolating abstract virtues about the religion and refusing to hear these kinds of, tangible real-world details that make them think about it with a human face and with dirt under the fingernails, with all the details of real-world, real-lived experience, right? You're trying to get them to think from the ground up in terms of empirical methods instead of from the sky down with ideological preaching, I suppose, for lack of a better word, right? So your friend may refuse to hear this. They may even stand up out of their seat and say, forget it. I'm not going to let you describe to me what profit actually is or how it works in the real world. Well, then why are you talking to me about profit? If your ideology is based on this, if your ideology is based on the idea that one grocery store is engaged in theft and slavery and exploitation because they have profit, and then you cross the street, you can literally cross the street and go to a co-op grocery store that doesn't have profit, and yet there is neither more nor less evidence of theft, slavery, or exploitation. The exploitation of man by man, to borrow a phrase. Where is this dramatic difference when we remove profit from the equation? Now, depending on the particular person, they might have experience with the military having large-scale nonprofit operations. Have you ever been to a barber shop on a military base? It's a lot like a barber shop, which is created by the profit motive, but it's not. I mean, it's the finances, the economics of how that barber shop operates is very different. You can talk to scientists who've been in research labs. Some of them are in the for-profit corporate side of the world. Some of them are run by the military, where, again, it's not a profit motive. It's just a command coming from a commander. So if profit is so important, if it has this profound ethical significance, why is it that we look in vain for the evidence of that everywhere empirically in the real world? All right. Now, there is a more abstract way to reason through this problem, and it is to say this. If you were a military commander and you said, hey, I want you to build this bridge, so you're giving orders to the military Corps of Engineers, or maybe it's a war situation where it's just ordinary soldiers. Okay, here are the number of resources we have. Here's how much money we have. Here's how much time we have. I want you to build this bridge, as quickly as possible, as cheaply as possible. And your soldiers go out and build that bridge, and they come back to you and say, hey, guess what? We managed to build the bridge in less time, with less resources, using less money and less manpower. We brought it in under budget. Would you as a military commander say, that's terrible, you turned a profit? If you were the director of a university or college training institute that's a nonprofit institute, it's completely, let's just say it's not merely public sector, let's say it's a charity training center, right? And you give orders for them to take on some project like this. You want them to go into a grass field and set up a tent and then teach a series of training courses so that a bunch of homeless people can learn how to be metal welders. Let's just say this is the situation. We've got some homeless people who want to be trained to go into welding because there's some new jobs hiring for welders, okay? So you got to set up the equipment, you got to set up the tent. You say, okay, I have so much money, so much resource, so much manpower, and so much time. And the people you give the orders to, bunch of teachers and helpers and what have you, who go out to do this task. They finish it under budget, ahead of schedule. They don't use all the resources. They don't use all the money. They don't use the. Would you say to them, that's terrible? You turned a profit. Okay? What is profit? Why would anyone in those situations describe profit as theft, profit as slavery, right? And the irony is, of course, if you've been in the military, if you've read books of military history, very often military orders can be far more tyrannical and inflexible than the private sector for-profit side of the business. In the private sector, you may have a flexible attitude. Okay, this could go over budget, this could go under budget. We have different options. And what happened in the Soviet Union really was the militarization of civilian life. That's why technically communism is referred to as a command economy, in contrast to a free market economy or free enterprise economy. It's a command economy because you've removed the price mechanism, you've removed the profit mechanism, but instead you just have tyrannical people giving tyrannical orders, like your military superior, who's put there by the government, like your military superior, and who's paid a salary, and they are trying to get people to work as hard as possible, to produce as much as possible, to exact as much profit as possible out of them, but nobody's allowed to call it profit anymore because you're working under a military dictatorship that happens to call itself communist, socialist, or left wing. Okay? So the short answer is you answer the question of profit is theft. You answer the vilification of profit and the broader vilification of capitalism by really in a meaningful way addressing the question of what is profit and illustrating it for them both in a tangible empirical way and I think through a little bit of abstract reasoning. I close this video with my usual warning. What we describe as capitalism is not a system, it's not a philosophy, it's not an ideal. It's just the way of getting things done that emerged ersatz, piece by piece, pell-mell, ad hoc, in an unplanned morass, in a spontaneous way. What we call capitalism now emerged from the demolition of feudalism in Europe. That's all it is. There are sets of standards and practices and expectations we have, but capitalism, just like, say, the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution has no manifesto. We can call it a revolution, right? You could talk about the capitalist revolution, okay? But it's completely false to look at, say, the English Revolution, the English Civil War, as being for or about or establishing capitalism, or even having an ideology or utopian plan for capitalism. And many communists would deny this, but it's just as false to talk about, say, the French Revolution, or I would say the Indian independence struggle. There are many, many revolutions that you can say, looking back at history, established capitalism. You could look at Japan going through its series of modernizing revolutions, but they were not for capitalism, because capitalism wasn't enunciated as an ideal or a utopia to be attained. It's just what emerged from the disintegration of, the tearing down of, feudalism in Europe.